We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Chapter 4. On Sunday morning, the change was one day nearer. I was resolute about not thinking my 3 magic words and would not let them into my mind, but the air of change was so strong that there was no avoiding it. Change lay over the stairs and the kitchen and the garden like fog. I would not forget my magic words. They were melody, Gloucester, Pegasus, but I refused to let them into my mind. The weather was uneasy on Sunday morning, and I thought that perhaps Jonas would succeed, after all, in running up a storm. The sun shone into the kitchen, but there were clouds moving quickly across the sky, and a sharp little breeze that came in and out of the kitchen while I had my breakfast. "Wear your boots if you wander today," Constance told me. "I don't expect that Uncle Julian will sit outdoors today. It will be far too cool for him." "Pure spring weather," Constance said, and smiled out at her garden. "I love you, Constance," I said. "I love you too, silly Merricat." "Is Uncle Julian better?" "I don't think so. He had his tray while you were still asleep, and I thought he seemed very tired. He said he had an extra pill during the night. I think perhaps he is getting worse." "Are you worried about him?" "Yes, very." "Will he die?" "Do you know what he said to me this morning?" Constance turned, leaning against the sink, and looked at me with sadness. "He thought I was Aunt Dorothy, and he held my hand and said, 'It's terrible to be old and just lie here wondering when it will happen.' He almost frightened me." "You should have let me take him to the moon," I said. "I gave him his hot milk, and then he remembered who I was." I thought that Uncle Julian was probably really very happy with both Constance and Aunt Dorothy to take care of him, and I told myself that long, thin things would remind me to be kinder to Uncle Julian. This was to be a day of long, thin things, since there had already been a hair in my toothbrush, and a fragment of string was caught on the side of my chair, and I could see a splinter broken off the back step. "Make him a little pudding," I said. "Perhaps I will." She took out the long, thin slicing knife and set it on the sink. "Or a cup of cocoa and dumplings with his chicken tonight." "Do you need me?" "No, my Merricat, run along and wear your boots." The day outside was full of changing light, and Jonas danced in and out of shadows as he followed me. When I ran, Jonas ran, and when I stopped and stood still, he stopped and glanced at me, and then went briskly off in another direction as though we were not acquainted. And then he sat down and waited for me to run again. We were going to the long field, which today looked like an ocean, although I had never seen an ocean. The grass was moving in the breeze, and the cloud shadows passed back and forth, and the trees in the distance moved. Jonas disappeared into the grass, which was tall enough for me to touch with my hands while I walked, and he made small crooked movements of his own. For a minute the grass would all bend together under the breeze, and then there would be a hurrying pattern across it where Jonas was running. I started at one corner and walked diagonally across the long field toward the opposite corner, and in the middle I came directly to the rock covering the spot where the doll was buried. I could always find it, although much of my buried treasure was forever lost. The rock was undisturbed, and so the doll was safe. I am walking on buried treasure, I thought, with the grass brushing against my hands and nothing around me but the reach of the long field with the grass blowing and the pine woods at the end. Behind me was the house, and far off to my left, hidden by trees and almost out of sight, was the wire fence our father had built to keep people out. When I left the long field, I went between the 4 apple trees we called our orchard and along the path toward the creek. My box of silver dollars buried by the creek was safe. Near the creek, well hidden, was one of my hiding places which I had made carefully and used often. I had torn away 2 or 3 low bushes and smoothed the ground. All around were more bushes and tree branches, and the entrance was covered by a branch which almost touched the ground. It was not really necessary to be so secret, since no one ever came looking for me here, but I liked to lie inside with Jonas and know that I could never be found. I used leaves and branches for a bed, and Constance had given me a blanket. The trees around and overhead were so thick that it was always dry inside, and on Sunday morning I lay there with Jonas listening to his stories. All cat stories start with the statement, "My mother, who was the first cat, told me this," and I lay with my head close to Jonas and listened. There was no change coming, I thought, here. Only spring. I was wrong to be so frightened. The days would get warmer, and Uncle Julian would sit in the sun, and Constance would laugh when she worked in the garden, and it would always be the same. Jonas went on, and then we sang, and then we sang, and the leaves moved overhead, and it would always be the same. I found a nest of baby snakes near the creek and killed them all. I dislike snakes, and Constance had never asked me not to. I was on my way back to the house when I found a very bad omen, one of the worst. My book nailed to a tree in the pine woods had fallen down. I decided that the nail had rusted away, and the book, it was a little notebook of our father's where he used to record the names of people who owed him money and people who ought, he thought, to do favours for him, was useless now as protection. I had wrapped it very thoroughly in heavy paper before nailing it to the tree, but the nail had rusted and it had fallen. I thought I had better destroy it in case it was now actively bad and bring something else out to the tree, perhaps a scarf of our mother's or a glove. It was really too late, although I did not know it then. He was already on his way to the house. By the time I found the book, he had probably already left his suitcase in the post office and was asking directions. All Jonas and I knew then was that we were hungry, and we ran together back to the house and came with the breeze into the kitchen. "Did you really forget your boots?" Constance said. She tried to frown and then laughed. Silly Merricat. Jonas had no boots. It's a wonderful day. Perhaps tomorrow we'll go to gather mushrooms. Jonas and I are hungry today. By then he was already walking through the village toward the Black Rock, with all of them watching him and wondering and whispering as he passed. It was the last of our slow, lovely days, although, as Uncle Julian would have pointed out, we never suspected it then. Constance and I had lunch, giggling and never knowing that while we were happy, he was trying the locked gate and peering down the path and wandering the woods, shut out for a time by our father's fence. The rain started while we sat in the kitchen, and we left the kitchen door open so we could watch the rain slanting past the doorway and washing the garden. Constance was pleased, the way any good gardener is pleased with rain. "We'll see colour out there soon," she said. "We'll always be here together, won't we, Constance?" "Don't you ever want to leave, Merricat?" "Where could we go?" I asked her. "What place would be better for us than this? Who wants us outside? The world is full of terrible people." "I wonder sometimes." She was very serious for a minute, and then she turned and smiled at me. "Don't worry, my Merricat, nothing bad will happen." There must have been just about the minute he found the entrance and started up the driveway, hurrying in the rain, because I had only a minute or two left before I saw him. I might have used that minute or two for so many things. I might have warned Constance somehow, or I might have thought of a new safer magic word, or I might have pushed the table across the kitchen doorway as it happened. I played with my spoon and looked at Jonas, and when Constance shivered, I said, "I'll get your sweater for you." That was what brought me into the hall as he was coming up the steps. I saw him through the dining room window, and for a minute, chilled, I could not breathe. I knew the front door was locked. I thought of that first. "Constance," I said softly, not moving, "there's one outside." "The kitchen door, quickly." I thought she had heard me because I heard her move in the kitchen, but Uncle Julian had called at that moment and she went into him, leaving the heart of our house unguarded. I ran to the front door and leaned against it and heard his steps outside. He knocked quietly at first and then firmly, and I leaned against the door, feeling the knocks hit at me, knowing how close he was. I knew already that he was one of the bad ones. I had seen his face briefly, and he was one of the bad ones, who go around and around the house trying to get in, looking in the windows, pulling and poking and stealing souvenirs. He knocked again and then called out, "Constance? Constance!" Well, they always knew her name. They knew her name and Uncle Julian's name and how she wore her hair and the colour of the 3 dresses she had to wear in court and how old she was and how she talked and moved, and when they could they looked close in her face to see if she was crying. "I want to talk to Constance," he said outside, the way they always did. It had been a long time since any of them came, but I had not forgotten how they made me feel. At first, they were always there waiting for Constance, just wanting to see her. "Look," they said, nudging each other and pointing. "There she is. That one. That's the one. Constance. Doesn't look like a murderess, does she?" They told each other. "Listen, see if you can get a picture of her when she shows again. Let's just take some of these flowers," they said comfortably to each other. "Get a rock or something out of the garden. We can take it home to show the kids." "Constance?" he said outside. "Constance!" He knocked again. "I want to talk to Constance," he said. "I have something important to say to her." They always had something important they wanted to tell Constance, whether they were pushing at the door or yelling outside or calling on the telephone or writing the terrible, terrible letters. Sometimes they wanted Julian Blackwood, but they never asked for me. I had been sent to bed without my supper. I had not been allowed in the courtroom. No one had taken my picture. While they were looking at Constance in the courtroom, I had been lying on the cot at the orphanage, staring at the ceiling, wishing they were all dead, waiting for Constance to come and take me home. "Constance, can you hear me?" he called outside. "Please listen for just a minute." I wondered if he could hear me breathing on the inside of the door. I knew what he would do next. First, he would back away from the house, sheltering his eyes from the rain, and look up at the windows upstairs, hoping to see a face looking down. Then he would start toward the side of the house, following the walk which was only supposed to be used by Constance and me. When he found the side door, which was never opened, he would knock there, calling Constance. Sometimes they went away when no one answered at either the front door or the side, the ones who were faintly embarrassed at being here at all and wished they had not bothered to come in the first place because there was really nothing to see and they could have saved their time or gone somewhere else. They usually hurried off when they found they were not going to get in to see Constance, but the stubborn ones, the ones I wished would die and lie there dead on the driveway, went around and around the house, trying every door and tapping on the windows. "We got a right to see her," they used to shout. "She killed all those people, didn't she?" They drove cars up the steps and parked there. Most of them locked their cars carefully, making sure all the windows were shut before they came to pound at the house and call to Constance. They had picnics on the lawn and took pictures of each other standing in front of the house and let their dogs run in the garden. They wrote their names on the walls and on the front door. "Look," he said outside, "you've got to let me in." I heard him go down the steps and knew he was looking up. The windows were all locked. The side door was locked. I knew better than to try to look out through the narrow glass panels on either side of the door. They always noticed even the slightest movement. And if I had even barely touched the dining room drapes, he would have been running at the house shouting, "There she is! There she is!" I leaned against the front door and thought about opening it and finding him dead on the driveway. He was looking up at a blank face of a house, looking down because we always kept the shades drawn on the upstairs windows. He would get no answer there, and I had to find Constance a sweater before she shivered anymore. It was safe to go upstairs, but I wanted to be back with Constance while he was waiting outside, so I ran up the stairs and snatched a sweater from the chair in Constance's room and ran downstairs and down the hall into the kitchen, and he was sitting at the table in my chair. "I had 3 magic words," I said, holding the sweater. Their names were Melody, Gloucester, Pegasus, and we were safe until they were said out loud. "Merricat," Constance said. She turned and looked at me, smiling. "It's our cousin Charles Blackwood. I knew him at once. He looks like father." "Well, Mary," he said. He stood up. He was taller now that he was inside, bigger and bigger as he came closer to me. Got a kiss for your cousin Charles? Behind him, the kitchen door was wide open. He was the first one who had ever gotten inside, and Constance had let him in. Constance stood up. She knew better than to touch me, but she said, Merricat, Merricat, gently, and held out her arms to me. I was held tight, wound round with wire. I couldn't breathe, and I had to run. I threw the sweater on the floor and went out the door and down to the creek where I always went. Jonas found me after a while, and we lay there together, protected from the rain by the trees crowding overhead, dim and rich in the kind of knowing, possessive way that trees have of pressing closer. I looked back at the trees and listened to the soft sound of the water. There was no cousin, no Charles Blackwood, no intruder inside. It was because the book had fallen from the tree. I had neglected to replace it at once, and our wall of safety had cracked. Tomorrow I would find some powerful thing and nail it to the tree. I fell asleep listening to Jonas just as the shadows were coming down. Sometime during the night, Jonas left me to go hunting, and I woke a little when he came back, pressing against me to get warm. Jonas, I said, and he purred comfortably. When I woke up, the early morning mists were wandering lightly along the creek, curling around my face and touching me. I lay there laughing, feeling the almost imaginary brush of the mist across my eyes and looking up into the trees.